Satnam. My name's Guru Fateh Singh. I teach Kundalini Yoga, and there are other things I do as well. Sometimes I write books, and today I'm going to talk about a book that I was able to put together. It's called Badges of Bondage, and I first published it about 25 years ago. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of how that book came to be and what it is, what it's about. I'm not going to give away the ending, you know. You have to buy the book, but or talk to somebody who read it, or you can borrow it. But this is the story of Badges of Bondage, the conquest of the Sikh mind. So I did another project first. This is a follow-up project. Back in 1983, my teacher, Yogi Bhajan, he asked me to write his, I don't know, he asked me, he told me, he gave me the great opportunity to write his biography, which I very slowly did because I was running a business and I'd soon be a dad and lots of things going on. But finally, he sent me a fax one day and said, "How's the biography?" So um, we finished it, sent it off in May of 1995. And I sent off another book too, all at the same time, a little book about sadhana. I knew that was his most important teachings. So I sent those off to the reviewers in New Mexico, the Kundalini Research Institute, to see what would happen. And by that time, it was a funny time of my life. Um, I had dedicated myself to live for the Dharma, to live for these teachings, and no more to sell, you know, even Waguru chews. The Waguru chew is a pretty nice candy, but it's a candy, you know. I mean, it's very sweet. People blew a lot of people's minds. There's a candy made in Oregon called a Waguru chew. But I sold yogi tea and different things. But my business went down, and there are good reasons for that. Um, and it just offered me an opportunity if I would take it to do other things. And I said, let me do what I can do from my heart. Let me do original work rather than selling other people's work. And I finished the biography, first draft, and I sent off the uh, draft of the sadhana book. And then, having just about run out of money, I got on a bike and said, the best thing I could figure is with the little bit of money I have and with this vow that I've made, go see my teacher on my bike, which sounded maybe a little crazy, but I knew somebody else who'd ridden their bike from Rochester, Florida, for the winter solstice. So we had a summer solstice, and I had about 6 good weeks to go. And so I rode my bike. And that's the story in itself. I ended up in India. I mean, my knees gave up by the time I got to Michigan from Toronto, but it was all perfect. So I had a history of going to the London Sikh Society in London, Ontario, and giving teachings there, giving classes, doing camps for the young people, and I did that. And this time at the end, I was offered a ticket to go to India. So I went, and very grateful. And I met Sant Brother Darshan Singh, who had a dera, a kind of an ashram there. I'd met him first in Canada, but when I went to India, he offered me to stay there, and he was very gracious and very kind. And so I went there, and first there was a Sikh conference, a global Sikh conference. Yogiji was there. A lot of people were there. The whole who's who of Sikhism was there. Maybe 1 million people from all over the place. A few people I knew, they came with Yogiji. And so I was there. And but when all that was over, then there I was in the Dera. And what do you do? And my best inspiration was to research another book. And the theme, the topic, was Badges of Bondage, the conquest of the Sikh mind. Guru Nanak said, Manajita Jagajit, if you can conquer your mind, the whole world is at your feet. First conquer yourself, and then you have no enemies, no obstacles, no problems. And but I looked at it the other way and said to myself, well, what if somebody else conquers your mind? What if somebody brainwashes you? What if somebody conquers your domain, your kingdom, your takes over your life and all the details of it, the economy and the politics and the justice system and the education system? What happens then? And so that's what I said about researching. And I found some good friends at the libraries there, the Bhai Guru Das Library at Guru Nanak Dev University and the SGPC Library by the Golden Temple. And they helped me with their collections there. I found books there you wouldn't find in the West, a different orientation. I mean, people have been through colonialism there, right? The other side of it. Whereas in Canada, we sit very high and mighty and very fine, white privilege, But in India, they had different kinds of books and a little more critical. And so I found those books and I had a good time. I like digging into alternative histories. And so that was very fun. And Sant Baba Darshan Singh, my host, was a case in itself. I mean, he was a great sadhu, a great forest yogi. He was one of those kind of guys that lived in the forest with the wild animals. That's where he did his meditation. He was a real guy and didn't speak any English. And this was a legacy of British colonialism because he grew up under the British when India was a colony, and he made a vow never to learn English. Not that he was dumb and he couldn't learn. He didn't want to learn. He didn't want to play their game. So I respected that, and we communicated as best we could, as best I could, my limited Punjabi, but it worked out. And while I was at the Dare, I was very lucky. I met a doctor there. He was quite old, I would say, maybe 80. And that was 1995, 96. And he gave me a nice little chapter to my book because I knew that everybody drinks tea. That's part of the Punjabi Sikh culture. Chai, chai, chai. Drink the tea first thing in the morning. Drink tea middle of the day. Drink tea, tea and biscuit. But I knew that was a British import. We had our own yogi tea. Our yogi tea, our real Indian tea that we love so much, spice tea. But he told me it was great for him to be there and to share with me how during the British time they marketed it. They'd been growing tea in Assam and selling it all over the world. Even the 13 colonies, they had their tea party in the late 1700s, a Boston Tea Party. But in India, people didn't drink tea until the British needed another market, right? And so they started selling it to their colonials, to the people in India. And here's how doctor told me they did it. They were very smart. They apparently some people they would get a truck, and on the back of the truck they have a big vat of tea, steaming tea, with milk and sugar all made up, and they would have a phonograph, like a early model record player, and with that phonograph they would play music. So they would go to the villages, and people would be astounded. They say, "Wow, these Angrezis, these colonial conquerors, they've really got it made. They've got the truck, where we've got buffaloes, they've got truck, and they've got this recording that makes all this music, and they've got this strange thing that they drink." And I've studied colonialism, I've studied missionary adventures, and when you're on the other side, it all looks so magical. These superior Europeans, they have something going, and you want to get what they've got. And so the Punjabis, like everybody else, they said, what have they got? Well, one thing they got is tea. So maybe we drink tea, we'll have their secret. We'll be like them. We'll be successful like them. Well, they gave away free tea. People drank tea. They liked it. And of course, caffeine has an addictive capacity. And so soon they were drinking tea every day. Very clever marketing. So it was fun. I went through it. I went through all those different aspects, the brainwashing, the education system, the change of the justice system, the change of the economy, change of so many things. Basically, the change of how people thought, their way of thinking, how they thought of themselves, how they thought of the British, and One thing I wanted to highlight, which I did highlight, was the role of the Namdaris. Now, typically, if you talk to an average Sikh and you say Namdaris, oh, those kukas, those weirdos. Yeah, they believe that, Guru Gobind Singh, had a successor, it was 11th Guru, 12th Guru. Those guys are just, they're apostates. They're not real Sikhs. But there are other people that say, the British manipulated the relationship between different branches of Sikhs to make them apostates. If you really read their history, um, they were really gung ho. They were in the forefront of resisting the British oppression, and they did some great things. They created their own postal system because they knew the British were reading their mail. You know, now we talk about you know the government reading your emails. Well, back in the old days, the British would actually read your physical mails, and they knew what was going on because they didn't want subversion, right? They didn't want rebels, and so they did that. They created their own education system because they didn't trust the British to bring up their children properly. They knew the British had an agenda to basically brainwash everybody to be good colonial subject. And so they did their own education system. They did their own justice system because they didn't trust British justice, and so on. And they all had their own clothes. They said, let's just make our own clothes. We can grow cotton here. Now, why do we have to buy foreign clothes? Clothes made in Birmingham, in the mills over there. And so they were really astounding. And, it got so far the British were so upset at one point that they got about 70 of these Namdaris and just blew them away with cannons. They were so frustrated to try and make a point. They hung them, and they were really desperate to put down the Namdaris. And, Mahatma Gandhi, who was very famous for his role in the British independence movement, he picked up the Namdari call to grow your own clothes, grow your own cotton, spin your own clothes, spin your own cotton. Well, that originated with them. He got a lot of credit for it, but the Namdaris, they were the first. And so I wanted to give them credit. I know my teacher brought me to understand Sikhism much better. Yogi Bhajan, Bhajan Singh Kasi Yogi Ji, he also made efforts when he went to India to reconcile with the Namdari. So it was the least I could do to tell a bit of their history. And speaking of the textile industry, I want to tell you another a kind of a funny thing that I learned when I was in Amritsar. There's a place there, it's called the Putligar. So my background is German, and I know there's a European tradition of puppet theater, puppet performance. And so I thought while I was in Amritsar, oh, there's a Putligar, must be a puppet theater. So because Putli means a puppet and Gar means a house. So I went with the neighborhood, and I didn't see anything. So I asked somebody, Putligar, where's the Putligar? And they said, no, you don't understand. The Putligar, that's a textile factory. And so I thought, what is that? And then I thought a little deeply, and then I understood. It's a way of resisting this colonial, mechanized, factory, impersonal, dehumanizing consciousness to twist it and use a sense of humor. So a putligar, where they make textiles on huge scale. A putligar is where there are puppets, puppets made of cloth, and the puppets are the employees. If you work in the textile factory, work for the British, you become a puppet. You're a cloth person. So I thought that was brilliant. I wasn't looking for that, but it was a beautiful little observation. Um, so I'll leave most of the book. I'm not going to read you text by text, page by page, but I'll share with you. Sometimes there's movies and they give you outtakes. So I'll share with you just for fun. I'll share you a little outtake. In my first publication, my first edition, a little bit I talked about. I've reduced it. In the last version, I say in the last section there that the Punjabi Sikhs ended up very anglicized, very British in their thinking. And, they're drinking tea, and sometimes they eat meat, sometimes they smoke, their furniture, they furnish their house like an Angrez, like a British. And I said they're monogamous. I left it at one word. That's a very controversial subject. Second, third, and the current version. I don't really adventure far into that because I know that's a hot potato area. But just for the fun of it, I'll share with you a little bit of that because it's true. You know, Sikhs. There are apologists. There are coconut Sikhs, I call them. They're brown on the outside, white on the inside, and they like to say, I'm more British than you are. I'm more European than you are. I'm more modern than you are. And those old stories, don't believe them. Sikhs weren't really like that, you know. But the honest truth is that, of course, the British have been monogamous since Christianity arrived. Christianity has been monogamous for about 17, 1800 years. Not all in all, but for about that long. But most of the world has not been monogamous. You know, you'd study, if you really study world cultures, and neither the Sikhs. You know, I mean, people will argue this, and they will say, no, Guru Gobind Singh didn't really have three wives, or just one wife. But if you study seriously, you'll see that the sixth Guru had, I believe, three wives. The seventh Guru married a bunch of sisters, um, and the 10th Guru had three. And they were all very gracious relationships. He didn't go around looking for, women. But these women, or these girls, their parents proposed to the Guru's parents or to his mother that this marriage take place. And the Guru sometimes reluctantly accepted. So, in the time of Guru Hargobind, he had a saying, and it goes, Aurat iman, Dalit Gujran, Putr Nishan. It means, Aurat, woman, is my conscience. And Dalit Gujran means money is my servant. And Putr Nishan. Putr literally means my son. Nishan is my flag or my sign. And so the son is the flag bearer, and typically in a patriarchal society, he carries on the lineage and the property and all that stuff. But I think it's symbolic and it's significant that he makes this statement on behalf of womankind. You know that woman is my conscience. In English, we say woman is my better half. So that was part of that culture too. I know there's a lot of controversy to now. There are Sikh feminists with organizations that battle the Sikh patriarchy and the culture of aborting female fetuses and all that nonsense that Guru Nanak spoke against, but still going on. But I just find it remarkable that that culture lived in that time, and well, it's not ours anymore. And that's thanks for the British. Um, there's another outtake. I'm getting on now. We're almost 20 minutes, but I hope you're finding this entertaining. In the section, I talk about the beard. I mean, in English culture, we say, "Oh, I'm clean shaven." So it means if somebody has a beard, their face isn't exactly clean. Even though Shakespeare, the great artist, he said, if somebody hasn't got a beard, they're barefaced. Barefaced means shameless. So I made a list. Yeah, in the new version too, we still have a list. And if you get the digital version, you'll have links to pictures. You can see the pictures of a lot of the um, freedom fighters who were Sikh in that time, who kept their beards out. You didn't tie them up. And but in my second edition, made a little bit of an apology about that because my own teacher, Harbhajan Singh Kalsi, when he worked with the British government, excuse me, with the Indian government, um, in their finance department, he tied up his beard because everybody does that. Every government employee does that. And also there's Hukum Singh, Sardar Hukum Singh, who was Speaker of Parliament and very brilliant and devoted Sikh who helped to create the modern state of Punjab, whereas Punjabis, Sikhs didn't have their own state for quite a while. In the 50s, he helped with that. And then there's Gyani Zail Singh, who was the president of India, and you know, some Bindranwale, some Gurnell Singh Bindranwale used to make fun of him. Because, old John Singh thing up his beard and dyeing it black. And John Singh, he was a real target for John Singh. But, to his credit, when everybody was telling the president to quit his job after the Indian army had attacked the Golden Temple, he, on Yogaji's advice, kept his post. Because Yogaji knew, and he told the president that if you quit, then Sikhs will be considered to be outsiders. Sikhs will be considered to be traitors to the country, and there will be a real pogrom. There will be a real genocide. What happened in Delhi in fall of 1984 will just be a foreshadowing of a much, much bigger Holocaust. But he held his post, and so that took a lot of courage. So this edition, I didn't mention Sant Janelle Singh because actually the book, it was a mistake in my first edition. Only goes to 1947, but I also didn't want to make an issue about that so much. Some people can be patriotic and still tie up their beard. Who knows what's going on inside their head? Yeah, it's very fortunate that I was able to do this research. Some years later, I was able to work with Dr. Chindani um, here in Toronto and to study trauma, psychological trauma. And truly, colonialism is a traumatic experience. It's an experience of collective trauma. You have a few million people who are all traumatized. The famous traumatic experience of the 20th century is um, the camps, the Nazi concentration camps, the extermination camps. But colonialism everywhere is traumatic too. In Canada, we have the residential schools of our First Nations people. All of that is traumatic. And so I would say our Sikh nation, our Sikh brothers and sisters from Punjab, they're all still living with that trauma. We call it epigenetic trauma, trauma that gets passed on from generation to generation. And I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate that or to fully understand that when I wrote the book, but that's part of the big picture. I'd also like to say, oh yeah, here was a funny observation. I was in India, I can speak a little Punjabi. So this, in a way, was a high point of my visit to India, just as a researcher. So I was very blessed, I was very fortunate to get an interview with the secretary of the SGPC. That's the organization that governs the Sikh religion, especially their holy places and their schools, their colleges where they teach people who are to be educated in the Sikh religion. And I got an interview with him, the secretary, and I knew a little bit. I visited a missionary college in Ludhiana, and I saw the one in Amritsar, and I knew that these missionary colleges. So the first one was established under the nose of the British. The British had lots of missionary colleges. They were trying to convert everybody. But when the Sikhs finally took over their Golden Temple, one of the first things they did was create a missionary college, Sikh missionary college. But honestly, there's no missionaries. The only missionary who came out of India was Yogiji, Harbhajan Singh Khalsa Yogiji, and he never went to a missionary college. So I challenged the secretary, and I said in my simple Punjabi, I said, oh, over a cup of tea, tea and biscuits. Um, I asked him, he was a sweetheart. I asked him, how come Yogi Bhajan can be a missionary and share Sikh teachings all over the world, and the missionary colleges run by the SGPC can't do that? And you know what he said? He said, we don't know how to make missionaries. I couldn't laugh at him, but I felt so bad, so sorry. I mean, this is also a legacy of colonialism. The mind had been so colonialized, this guy, and not only him, but they just felt that they are just underdogs. The British are supreme, and their religion, there's no point in even trying to, it has no future. There's no point in trying to share it around. Nobody wants it. It's a third world religion. I don't know what they're thinking. Brown people's religion? how we call it, religion for people who have a nice tan. I you can spin it, but it's just utter nonsense. I mean, the way that what that said about his self-esteem and his concept of Sikh Dharma was very, for me, very enlightening. So that was my enlightening experience going to India. So what else? I'll read for you a few reviews, and then I'll leave you go if you're still with me. I've written a few articles for the Sikh Review in Calcutta, and I sent them a copy, and the editor, Sardar Saran Singh, he said some nice things. He said, thoughtful people everywhere will be touched by Guru Fateh Singh's concern as also benefit from reading of his first book. His first set of documented writings, succinct and neatly produced, explore the Sikh faith through history. His loyalty to the Guru's purpose is firm as a rock. His understanding of Gurbani is extraordinarily perceptive, and their rendering into English sensitively poetic. His objective in compiling the historic panorama to reawaken the true spirit of the Khalsa. Nice words. I also sent to Professor Harbans Singh. He was busy making the Encyclopedia of Sikhism at Punjab, what they call it, Punjabi University in Patiala. So he was still in the middle of it. It's 4 volumes. It's a beautiful encyclopedia. If you haven't seen it, it's a little expensive, but if you can find it, it's really a nice authoritative piece. And so he sent me. He said his review, your essay makes very cogent reading, and I enjoyed going through it. Your narration is powerful and effective. That's the part that I publish. I think he also said I went a little bit too far. Poor guy, he ties up his beard too. But anyway, those are kind words. Those are nice words for him to say that my narration is powerful and effective. I also visited Chandigarh, and there's an institute there of Sikh studies, and so they have an abstract there, a journal called Abstract of Sikh Studies, and Sardar Gurcharan Singh, I think he used to be in the army, he wrote a nice little review. He said, the author rightly laments the surrender of the rich spiritual heritage of Sikhism to the so-called secular, materialistic, and dehumanizing values of the West planted during British rule. Good synopsis. And I was very blessed also. My teacher doesn't really read books, but Guru Tej Singh, he's the fellow who started the cult security. He was with Yogiji, and he wrote me this. He said, I'm writing on behalf of the Siddhi Singh Sahib. The Siddhi Singh Sahib really enjoyed reading the excerpts from your books. Guru Tej took some excerpts and was appreciative of the work that you have put in. In addition, it gave me these excerpts and asked me to look at them as well. And I must say that I think you have done an excellent job. So Guru Tej said, you seem to have done considerable research, which is well documented. I also found your writing style comfortable to read and held my interest throughout. I felt that your approach is sound, for while it does not actually point fingers and place blame, it makes clear that Sikhs themselves are accountable and responsible for their circumstances. I especially like the section on beards, though I think that listing famous Sikhs who left their beards open was unnecessary, especially listing Bindranwale. Well, yeah, poor Bindranwale. God bless him. Controversial guy. Did a lot of brave things, but perhaps I should have left him out. The book only went to 1947. Anyway, so that was a mistake. Anyway, so I'm done blabbing about it in my book. Hopefully I can arrange so in the next couple of pages of this video, you can find a link. You can order it from Amazon, Kindle. You can get a digital copy, an ebook, or you can get a paperback copy. I haven't seen one yet, but I've heard it looks really beautiful. And hope you enjoy it. Tell other people about it. And be great. Don't be colonized. Conquer your own mind. Don't let other people conquer it. All right. All right. God bless you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.